Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Metropolis Radio. Today, we are exploring the idea of, does Hollywood need to rethink its China strategy? But before we go any deeper, guys, just remember that not all of my videos are going to be coming to the YouTube channel. Some will only be coming to my BitChute, Odyssey, and Rumble channels. So if you're watching this on YouTube and you have not started following me on at least one of those three alternative sites, the links to those are down in the description below. But anyway, guys, let's get into this from the Hollywood Reporter of all places. And that article is titled, Does Hollywood Need to Rethink Its China Strategy? As the Asian power's domestic film market mostly thrives, the disappointing box office for Warner Bros. As The Batman and other recent releases suggest a continuing decline in audience enthusiasm for US tentpoles. Quote, China seems to have turned its back on Hollywood. Well, no fucking surprise there, as the Chinese have always stabbed their allies in the back. And, 10 years later, and nowhere near enough money, and 10 years later, not nearly as profitable as was promised. So does Hollywood need to rethink its China strategy? In short, yes. A long answer, fuck yes. But let's actually go through all of this rather than leaving it that simple. When news spread in February that Warner Bros.' The Batman had been granted an official release date in China of March 18th, just 2 weeks after its North American debut, it was cause for considerable relief among executives engaged in the international distribution business. No Hollywood superhero movie had made it to China in more than 2 years, thanks to pandemic delays and a mysterious clampdown on U.S. tentpole releases by Beijing's film regulators. Now at last, a top-tier title, one with the Cape Crusader no less, could remind the industry of what a Hollywood blockbuster was capable of in the world's largest theatrical market. Alas, it was not to be. At least not as anyone would have hoped. Hollywood's streak of bad luck in the Middle Kingdom continues. The week before The Batman was set to unfurl, China was hit with its worst COVID-19 infection flare-up since the pandemic began in Wuhan in late 2019. Oh, so it's not that China is turning its back on Hollywood, it's still fucking COVID's fault. Everything is fucking COVID's fault at this point. I stubbed my toe last night on my bedpost. It's fucking COVID's fault. My movie only made $500 million instead of $750 million. It must be because of COVID. Cinemas in such major cities such as Shenzhen and Shanghai shuttered, and a smatter of smaller outbreaks in some 28 provinces cast a chill over consumer activity nationwide. After bowing to $134 million in North America, The Batman opened to just $12.1 million in China and is projected to finish its run in the country with about $22 million. If there's a silver lining in the present moment, it's that U.S. theatrical product has begun to resume its flow in China. Quote, the Hollywood studios can at least be a little more optimistic that their movies are being introduced into the country again, notes MKM Partners analyst Eric Handler. In 2021, just 20 revenue-sharing U.S. titles were released in Chinese cinemas, compared with 31 U.S. tentpole releases before the pandemic in 2019. Hollywood's own COVID-related postponements were the chief hindrance for the studios in the first half of last year, but by summer their distribution pipelines were pumping again. By then, however, local politics surrounding the 100th anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party dictated that Beijing regulators would leave American product on the shelf in favor of patriotical-themed Chinese fare. Surging nationalism and political sensitivity among the local public, encouraged by the fraught diplomatic relations between Beijing and Washington, later derailed the release prospects of a slew of bankable Hollywood movies in the final stretch of the calendar, including Marvel tentpoles Black Widow, Eternals, and Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings from Disney, Space Jam: A New Legacy from Warner Brothers, and Venom: Let There Be Carnage and Spider-Man: No Way Home from Sony, all fan-favorite properties that collectively could have earned hundreds of millions of dollars. I would like to object to this whole paragraph here and say that is cause for speculation. Where is it here? Later, the fraught diplomatic relations between Beijing and Washington later derailed the release prospects of a slew of bankable Hollywood movies. Again, that is debatable. You don't know how much Black Widow, Eternals, Shang-Chi, Space Jam 2, and Venom: Let There Be Carnage, Spider-Man: No Way Home would have made in China. You simply don't know it. So it's like, well, they could have earned hundreds of millions of dollars. Yes, but they could have also earned $5 each. You simply don't know. At this point, you're merely just speculating. I don't mind cautious optimism, but what I can't stand with analysis articles written like this is all of these calls for speculation of, oh no, we lost hundreds of millions of dollars because our movies got shelved. That's like saying you lost 150,000 sales of, I'm just going to throw this out there, The Witcher 3, right? The Witcher 3 was pirated on the Pirate Bay 150,000 times. It was actually I think it was pirated a lot more than that, but you get my point. Okay, so those are 150,000 lost sales. No. Maybe some of those people who pirated The Witcher 3 would have bought the game at full price, but how many of those people would not have bought the game at full price? You simply don't know. That's a statistic that is flat out unmeasurable. In recent weeks, China has begun to reopen the gates. Sony's Tom Holland star Uncharted opened March 14th, also hamstrung by COVID-related theater shutdowns. Again, it's all fucking COVID's fault. They can't stop blaming. COVID is now turning into the new 2008. If you guys ever watch these shows like Bar Rescue or Restaurant Impossible, most of these owners say, well, then the 2008 financial crisis happened, and that's when it all went downhill. It wasn't because of our stupid decisions and short-sightedness. It was because of 2008. It's 2015. It was because of 2008. It's now 2018. It was because of 2008. I think you guys get my point. And additional dates were given to Roland Emmerich's indie finance disaster film Moonfall, which opened March 25th to $9.7 million. Sony's animated sequel Hotel Transylvania Transformia is coming out on April 3rd, and Warner's Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore is coming out April 8th. In the case of Matt Reeves' The Batman, however, some analysts upon closer examination see additional cause for concern. More significant than the woeful result, which could be explained by the circumstances, are the earnings projections for the film that preceded the COVID flare-up. Early tracking suggested an opening in the $25 to $30 million range, arguably healthy by today's diminished standards, but lowly compared with contemporaneous Chinese films and the performance of any well-received Hollywood superhero title just a few years ago. Marvel titles have regularly earned vastly more, but even the comparatively poorly received Justice League opened with $52.1 million in 2017, Aquaman debuted with $94.2 million in 2018, and Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight Rises brought in $52.8 million way back in 2012, when China had about 80% fewer screens than it has today. The low earnings expectation for The Batman before the latest COVID outbreak suggests a continuation of a trend of Chinese audiences waning enthusiasm for Hollywood storytelling as the country's domestic film sector turns out gradually more accomplished action spectacles of its own. In 2012, Hollywood films amassed a 48.2% share of China's box office revenue, according to data from consultancy Gateway. By 2016, the U.S. share had slipped to 36%, and in 2021, it was 12.3%. Hollywood's increasingly exiguous China earnings of the pandemic era are all the more striking in comparison to local blockbusters' relatively enormous sales over the same period. During the past 2 years plus, only 2 Hollywood films have earned at least $100 million in China: Legendary Entertainment's Godzilla vs. Kong and Universal's Fast and Furious 9: The Fast Saga, F9: The Fast Saga. Meanwhile, more than 20 Chinese titles have hit that milestone. The biggest Chinese movies of the past several years by far have tended to be quote-unquote main melody films, a genre unique to the Chinese industry that refers to quasi-propagandistic movies embodying the official ideologies of the Chinese Communist Party. The top local hits of the past year are representative. The battle at Lake Changjin, which earned $899.4 million in 2021, and its sequel, The Battle at Lake Changjin Watergate Bridge, which has brought in $638 million since its February 1st release. Both films are emotionally rousing war epics glorifying China's victories over U.S. forces during key episodes in the Korean War, known in China as the War to Resist U.S. Aggression and Aid Korea. Studio insiders and box office analysts are more varied than usual in their interpretation of the significance of such trends. At a time of dangerously fraught U.S.-China diplomatic relations, some analysts worry that the same nationalistic currents at work among the Chinese public that have boosted main melody films into mega blockbusters could be chipping away at the hard-won audience enthusiasm for imported Hollywood releases, a reality that could become a headwind that the U.S. industry experiences for a generation. So wait, you mean you can't just win a bunch of people over with crap stories and crap characters with a bunch of pretty CGI special effects? I mean, I would argue straight up that this was fucking inevitable. You know, they lost the domestic market years ago with the bad stories, bad characters, and pretty CGI, so they brought all of that over to China, and we're blaming China for continuing to make those, but now China's film industry is quote-unquote maturing as well. So now what do the Hollywood studios have to say about that? You know, maybe if they didn't make a bunch of crap movies with pretty CGI to cover bad storytelling and bad character development, maybe they'd be in a different state of mind right now. But no. Remember, everything over the last 2 years is all COVID's fault. It's none of their bad decisions over the last decade. No. It's all COVID's fault. Quote, the recent state-backed production focused on main melody films, which extol communist values, adding a layer of uncertainty for all non-main melody product, including both Chinese language product as well as imports that include the major U.S. studios, says Rance Powell, president of Artisan Gateway. Hollywood product may also be experiencing the fresh challenges because of a continuing diversification of tastes between the Chinese audience living in the country's largest cosmopolitan cities, commonly referred to as Tier 1 and Tier 2 cities, and the hundreds of millions who reside in less developed, more provincial urban centers known as Tier 3, 4, and 5 cities. So, oh my god, you can't win them over with a bunch of, with just, pretty CGI and bad storytelling and bad characters. Quote, the China business increasingly hinges on the question of what will deliver for sophisticated viewers in Tier 1 and Tier 2 cities, and will it also deliver for people in Tiers 3 to 5, notes a Studio Insider. The battle at Lake Changjin can easily do that, but there's a smaller pool of Hollywood titles that play that way. As many critics have suggested, Reeves' sophisticated noir approach to the Batman brought something fresh to Gotham, which likely played a strong part in the film's healthy earnings in North America, Europe, and elsewhere. That same sophistication also appears to have pleased filmgoers in China's biggest urban centers. The Batman started its run with strong social scores on China's big ticketing apps as the core comic book fan base turned out in support. But it's unclear whether Reeves' brooding film ever would have connected with filmgoers in the more far-flung regions, whose embrace is increasingly necessary to create a local blockbuster in the country. Quote, the industry is facing enormous challenges everywhere with COVID, the streaming element, and all of the difficulties of doing a successful global theatrical rollout. Again, this is now the fourth or fifth time they've blamed COVID in this analytical piece. And then on top of it all, you're also supposed to win two very different markets within China, adds the Studio Insider. It's a very difficult needle to thread right now. After years of industry hype over the scale and potential of China, some studio executives remain vexed over how speculative their business in the market has always been, no matter how large the headline box office hauls. Under a trade agreement established in 2012, the U.S. studios are entitled to only 25% of box office sales revenue for their films in China, compared to 40 to 50% in other major markets, compounding the uncertainties of doing business in a highly censorious and politicized authoritarian state. The studios have never had control over their own release dates and have been at the mercy of Beijing regulators on all matters of scheduling. Thus, modeling box office potential in China during the greenlighting process has always been a matter of guesswork for the studios. Quote, we sometimes put a guess in the China column, but more often it is blank, or we run two models, with and without China, says a veteran financier. The majors assume that someday China would be a huge market for our product, the biggest on the planet. The economic bond that existed between the US and China was growing, which also made the world safer. Today, the economic reliance has changed for the worse. Currently, we believe that China no longer cares about being the number one theatrical market in the world. They just want nationalistic product. Quote, China seems to have turned its back on Hollywood, says one studio exec, adding that Hollywood's myriad efforts to more deeply engage with the Chinese industry through co-productions and other activities only serve to help local studios learn how to make better blockbusters of their own. So wait, you mean China used you for your technology and your filmmaking techniques, and now that they got what they wanted, they're more than happy to stab you in the back? Color me fucking shocked. Yet, even with just a 25% share of returns and all the operational constraints, China continues to offer the allure of major windfalls for the biggest Hollywood hits. Quote, for now, the China market remains at once too great an opportunity to disregard and too unpredictable to rely on, says Powell. The next big litmus test for the market will come with the release of Disney and Marvel Studios' Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, now scheduled for May 6th in the US, but still undated in China. If approved, it will break the mysterious streak of Marvel movies being shunned by Chinese regulators and provide a clear point of comparison for the local audience, which turned out in droves for the first Doctor Strange, a 2016 film that earned $109 million of its $677 million worldwide haul in China. Analysts will then await further indicators from Thor: Love and Thunder, Top Gun: Maverick, and Jurassic World: Dominion in the early summer. Quote, there's so much noise in the system right now, it's become very tough to connect the dots in China, adds MKM Partners' handler. Hopefully, over the coming months, we'll finally get a clear sense of where the business is headed. And guys, it's kind of odd that this is being written in the Hollywood Reporter, and I think it's being written in the Hollywood Reporter for one major reason, is that these Hollywood studios were promised these vast sums of money to expand into the Chinese market. But what's happened over the last decade? Oh, the Chinese studios basically used you to gain access to your technology so they can copy it, and your filmmaking style so they can copy it. And then once they have all that, they're gonna stab you in the back. And on top of that, the CCP is gonna keep 75% of the money. So you're getting criticism stateside for kowtowing to the Chinese Communist Party, and you're not making dick in the Chinese market by comparison. You know, in order for the movie to be a major hit in the Chinese market, in order for them to really make bank, their movies have to make at least $1 billion in the Chinese market in order for them to take home a sizable share of, $250 million. I don't think a single U.S. release in China has made anywhere near $1 billion in China. It just simply wasn't going to happen. So you have these studios that were basically promised all this money that never came, and now they're being criticized for kowtowing to communists. So now the real question is, why bother? Hence the question that sparked this whole article. Does Hollywood need to rethink its China strategy? Well, yeah, because the money never fucking came, and the Chinese did what the Chinese have always done, which is, take your technology and your knowledge and stab you in the fucking back. And guys, I'm going to go ahead and pretty much end it right here because I think you get my point by this point. If you stuck around this long, thanks so much for doing so. And if you've been following me long enough, I'm terrible at editing these videos, so I will just see you guys next time.